Eamonn Holmes issues damning verdict on Donald Trump as he wouldn't exist in UK. GB News host Eamonn Holmes has claimed Donald Trump wouldn't exist as a politician in the UK as he issued a damning verdict to his win in the US presidential election. Eamonn Holmes has insisted Donald Trump wouldn't exist as a politician in the UK following his win. It comes after Trump declared victory following the US presidential election against Kamala Harris. He is making a shock return to the White House after clinching the important swing states of North Carolina, Pennsylvania and Georgia. Trump claimed scores of states that polls did not anticipate he would win, leaving his backers, among them Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, thrilled. However, former This Morning host Eamonn has issued a damning verdict against the next president. The GB News host made a reference to Trump disrespecting women, following his conviction over alleged hush money payments made to pornographic actress Stormy Daniels to conceal a sexual encounter between them. Reacting to Trump declaring victory, Eamonn said, "If that was a British politician, he would not exist, he wouldn't be there." Eamonn's comments were made after a 40-minute speech by Trump. He questioned why Trump failed to mention opponent Kamala Harris during his speech. Eamonn's co-star Isabel Webster also shared her thoughts as she claimed President Joe Biden failed to sell a promise to the Americans that they wanted. Trump called victory in a speech to jubilant supporters in Florida, saying he had been given an unprecedented and powerful mandate by the American people. There's still counting going on in a handful of states, however it has been confirmed Trump will return to the White House as 47th President of the United States. He will start his second term as President of the United States on January 20, 2025. In 2020, it took 4 days for Democrat Joe Biden to be declared winner of the presidential election due to the tight nature of the voting campaign. Back in 2016, Trump was able to declare victory in a comparatively swift few hours. In a victory speech in Florida earlier today, Trump said, "Nobody expected that. Nobody. Thank you very much for that, and you have some great senators and great new senators, and it also looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives." Trump also thanked his beautiful wife, Melania, as she joined him on stage at West Palm Beach, Florida. He added, "I want to thank you all very much," praising the incredible MAGA movement. "Frankly, I believe this was the best political movement of all time," he said. Trump added, "We have a country that needs help very badly." He then promised to fix everything, and confirmed he believed he had won the race as he said, "It's clear that this is a political victory." Opponent Harris was set to speak to crowds at Howard University in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday night. However, when the results came in that Trump was due to return the White House, she opted not to speak. London, UK, in a scathing assessment of former U.S. President Donald Trump, renowned British broadcaster Eamonn Holmes has delivered a no-holds-barred critique, stating that the controversial figure wouldn't exist in the UK, due to the cultural and political landscape that is very different from America's. Holmes, whose career spans decades as a prominent TV host and commentator, suggested that Trump's rise to power and his continued influence in the American political scene are symptoms of a deeper issue within the U.S. system, one that the UK's political system would simply not tolerate. Holmes' remarks came during a live broadcast of ITV's This Morning, the morning talk show where he co-hosts alongside presenter Ruth Langsford. The pair were discussing global politics and the upcoming 2024 U.S. presidential election when Holmes turned his focus to Trump, offering a blunt verdict on the political figure's legacy and his influence on the political discourse in both the US and the wider world. Donald Trump would not exist in the UK. He wouldn't have made it past the first round of scrutiny, Holmes said, referring to the distinctly different political environment and public standards in the United Kingdom compared to the United States. In the UK, we have a different relationship with politicians. There is a certain decorum, a level of civility that is expected of those who hold positions of power. Trump, with all his bombastic, often divisive rhetoric, would simply not have been tolerated. The Trump phenomenon and its cultural context. Holmes' comments come at a time when Trump is preparing for another possible run at the White House, with polling suggesting that the former president continues to hold significant sway over the American electorate, despite numerous scandals, legal battles, and accusations of misconduct that would likely have derailed other political figures. Holmes, however, is adamant that such a trajectory would have been impossible in the UK, where the political environment, and the expectations placed upon public figures, is vastly different. The British public has a very different threshold for what it deems acceptable behavior from its political leaders, Holmes continued. We have our fair share of political scandals, but the UK political system is still structured in such a way that individuals like Trump simply would not have the same platform. Holmes elaborated, noting that the UK's cleaner political structure and the role of the media as a check on power meant that any figure like Trump, with his history of inflammatory remarks, legal challenges, and allegations of misconduct, would have faced immediate and sustained pressure from both the press and other political figures. In Holmes' view, the UK political landscape places far more emphasis on accountability and public scrutiny, making it difficult for figures like Trump to maintain their popularity in the same way they do in the US. Civility in British politics versus Trump's rhetoric. A major part of Holmes' critique revolved around Trump's notorious rhetoric in his approach to political discourse. From his inflammatory comments about immigrants and women to his personal attacks on political opponents, journalists, and public figures, Trump has often been accused of undermining the norms of political discourse. In Holmes' view, such behavior would simply be unacceptable in the UK, where civility in politics, despite its own flaws, is a much more entrenched value. Donald Trump's ability to insult people with impunity, to spread misinformation, and to deflect accountability for his actions, has been one of the most troubling aspects of his political career, Holmes remarked. That kind of rhetoric might resonate with some segments of the American population, but in the UK, people would quickly see through it. We have a different sense of what is acceptable from our politicians. The UK, Holmes argued, would demand a higher level of accountability from its leaders. The press, he noted, plays a crucial role in holding politicians accountable, with major UK newspapers and broadcasters often acting as watchdogs over political figures, even when they belong to the ruling party. In contrast, the US political culture, particularly in the era of Trump, has been marked by a growing polarization, where mainstream media outlets are often accused of bias, and many conservative figures embrace alternative media platforms that reinforce their views. Trump's ability to manipulate the narrative and avoid responsibility for his own actions has been a key factor in his survival in American politics, Holmes said. But in the UK, there are certain expectations about truth, about decency, about transparency, that would make it incredibly difficult for someone like Trump to hold power. Trump's influence on global politics. While Holmes' comments were aimed primarily at the U.S. political system, he also addressed the wider impact that Trump's rise and continued presence have had on global politics. He was particularly critical of the way in which Trump has emboldened similar populist movements in other countries, including the UK. The rise of Trumpism is not just an American phenomenon, Holmes said. It has emboldened populist leaders across the world, from Viktor Orban in Hungary to the rise of far-right parties in Europe. It's created a blueprint for political success that relies on divisiveness, polarization, and the manipulation of public opinion. Holmes noted that while the UK has not seen a direct equivalent of Trump, the Brexit referendum and the rise of right-wing figures like Nigel Farage have, in his view, been a response to some of the same forces that fueled Trump's ascent. There's no doubt that Trump's success has been a template for some of the rhetoric and tactics we've seen in the UK and across Europe, he said. Populism is on the rise, and it's hard to ignore the influence that figures like Trump have had on this new wave of politics. Trump's political career, a rejection of norms. A recurring theme in Holmes' remarks was the notion that Trump's political career has been built upon a rejection of traditional political norms. Where British politicians are expected to demonstrate a certain level of decorum and professionalism, Trump's persona has been based on a kind of anti-establishment bravado that appeals to voters frustrated with the political elite. Trump's very presence as a political figure is a direct challenge to the established order, Holmes stated. He's not just a candidate who operates outside the norms, he actively rejects those norms. In the UK, people would not tolerate that kind of behavior from a prime minister or a member of parliament. There's an understanding that those in power are held to a higher standard, and that accountability is key to maintaining public trust. Holmes also reflected on the way in which Trump has repeatedly flouted the rules of political engagement, from his refusal to release his tax returns to his incitement of the January 6 Capitol riots. These are not just minor infractions, these are significant breaches of the kind of accountability we expect from our leaders, Holmes said. And yet, Trump continues to hold on to power and influence because the political system in the US allows for it. A divided US political system. Holmes was particularly critical of the divisions within the American political system, noting that the very structure of U.S. politics makes it difficult to hold figures like Trump accountable. The two-party system, combined with the power of the media and the deep polarization of the electorate, has allowed Trump to maintain a loyal base of supporters even as he faces multiple legal and ethical controversies. The U.S. is in a state of deep political dysfunction, Holmes said. The system is designed to encourage partisanship, and it allows figures like Trump to exploit those divisions for their own benefit. The UK has its own issues with party politics, but there's a much stronger sense of public accountability and an expectation that leaders should serve the people, not their own interests. Holmes also noted the role of money in American politics, which he believes has given Trump an advantage that would be almost impossible in the UK. In the US, money talks, he said. Trump's wealth has given him a platform that most politicians simply wouldn't have in the UK. Our political system is more dependent on party structures and public service than on individual wealth. The level of influence that someone like Trump has in the US would be unthinkable here. The future of Trump and global populism. Looking ahead to the future of both Trump and the broader populist movement, Holmes expressed concerns about the impact of divisive politics on the global stage. While he acknowledged that Trump's ability to connect with his base is undeniable, he warned that the long-term effects of his approach to politics could be damaging. In the UK, we've had our own battles with populism, particularly with Brexit, Holmes said. But what Trump has done in America is something else entirely. It's not just about politics, it's about undermining the very foundations of democracy. And that's something we should all be worried about. Holmes concluded by reiterating his belief that the US political system needs a reckoning. It's time for a serious conversation about how we handle leaders like Trump, not just in America, but across the world. We can't allow the norms of politics to be completely rewritten by those who have no regard for truth, for decency, or for accountability. As Trump continues to make headlines in the lead-up to the 2024 election, the debate over his impact on global politics and the political system remains as relevant as ever. Eamonn Holmes' strong words serve as a reminder of the stark differences between the political cultures of the US and the UK, and the Eamonn Holmes criticizes Donald Trump's disrespectful attitude to women. London, UK, Eamonn Holmes, the popular British broadcaster and television presenter, has publicly criticized former US President Donald Trump for his disrespectful and demeaning attitude towards women, claiming that the ex-leader's conduct toward women has been problematic throughout his career. Holmes, best known for his work on This Morning and his long career in British broadcasting, expressed his views during a recent interview on ITV's Loose Women, where the panel discussed the ongoing political developments in the US and the upcoming election cycle. The comments came in the wake of fresh controversies surrounding Trump, including his recent statements about women and his behavior that has drawn public outcry. Donald Trump's history with women speaks for itself, Holmes said, speaking candidly about the former president's history of remarks and allegations against him. It's not just the things he's said but also how he's treated women in positions of power and influence. From his infamous comments in the Access Hollywood tape to the way he's spoken about women in business and politics, it's a clear pattern. It's a pattern of disrespect and demeaning behavior. Trump's record on women has been a subject of controversy for years. His infamous 2005 comments on the Access Hollywood tape, where he was recorded boasting about groping women and kissing them without consent, continue to haunt his political career. Despite the backlash, Trump has repeatedly dismissed the comments as locker room talk, a term that many, including Holmes, see as a dangerous trivialization of serious issues related to misogyny and sexual harassment. Holmes, who is no stranger to tackling sensitive issues in the media, added, "There's no excuse for the way he talks about women. It doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire businessman or the President of the United States, you should always treat women with respect." Holmes calls for accountability. The comments from Holmes reflect a growing frustration among public figures and commentators about Trump's ability to avoid serious consequences for his past actions. Critics argue that despite multiple allegations of sexual misconduct, including accusations from over 24 women, Trump has managed to maintain his prominence in the political sphere. In his interview, Holmes emphasized the importance of accountability, particularly for public figures with immense influence. What kind of message does it send to young people, particularly young men, when someone with Trump's profile is allowed to repeatedly disrespect women with impunity? We can't just brush it off as part of the character, or the way it's always been. Holmes also discussed Trump's problematic rhetoric about women in politics, particularly his disparaging remarks about female politicians, journalists, and other women in leadership positions. His attacks on female political opponents have often included personal insults and sexist remarks, which critics say serve to undermine the credibility and authority of women in the public eye. Women like Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren, for example, have had to face the worst kind of sexism from him, Holmes remarked. It's not just the political differences, it's about going after them in the most personal and degrading way possible. And unfortunately, that kind of language has found an audience. The Trump legacy and public perception. Eamonn Holmes' critique of Donald Trump is part of a wider conversation on the former president's legacy and the way his actions have shaped public discourse around gender and power. Trump's handling of women has also been the subject of discussions in the #MeToo movement, which has drawn attention to pervasive issues of sexual harassment and discrimination in various industries, including politics. Since leaving office in 2021, Trump has continued to be a divisive figure in American politics, with his potential return to the White House in 2024 sparking both fierce support and fierce opposition. His comments and behavior toward women remain a significant point of contention, with many calling for more thorough scrutiny of his personal conduct. Holmes, in his remarks, suggested that Trump's behavior was symptomatic of a wider issue within American politics and society. There's a larger conversation here about how power is wielded and how women are still, in many ways, viewed as secondary or less than, Holmes said. We can't ignore that, especially as the world continues to grapple with the reality of systemic inequality. Support and criticism of Trump. While Holmes' criticism has resonated with many, especially those who have long been critical of Trump's behavior toward women, the former president still enjoys a loyal base of supporters, some of whom argue that the media and political elites have unfairly demonized him. Trump's defenders often argue that his remarks were taken out of context or misrepresented, and that his track record of appointing women to high positions of power, including the appointment of women to his administration, should be taken into account. Trump himself has remained defiant in the face of criticism. At a recent rally, he dismissed accusations of misogyny, claiming that his public image had been unfairly painted by fake news outlets and political opponents. I've always respected women, and I'll continue to do so, Trump said in a speech to his supporters. But what I won't do is back down to anyone trying to tear me down or silence me. Public figures speak out. Eamonn Holmes is not the only public figure to criticize Trump's treatment of women. Prominent figures in politics, entertainment, and media have consistently called out the former president's behavior. Some have even pointed to his long history of legal and ethical challenges, suggesting that his treatment of women could be a key issue for voters when it comes to deciding who to support in the next election. I think we're living in a time where we can no longer accept this kind of behavior from those in power, Holmes concluded. I'm not saying that people can't make mistakes, but there's a difference between making a mistake and continuing to perpetuate harm. There has to be a reckoning. As the 2024 U.S. presidential election draws near, it seems that Trump's relationship with women, and his controversial rhetoric surrounding them, will continue to be a central issue in political discourse. Conclusion. Eamonn Holmes' comments about Donald Trump's attitude toward women are a timely reminder that the conversation about gender equality, respect, and accountability is far from over. Whether or not Trump will face lasting political consequences for his behavior remains to be seen, but public figures like Holmes are ensuring that this critical issue remains in the spotlight. As voters head to the polls in the U.S. in 2024, the debate over how public figures, especially men in positions of power, treat women will no doubt remain a key consideration in the political discourse.